Welcome to a special edition of News Long Beach, Reimagining Diversity in Long Beach. I'm your host, Andrea Solsona, publisher and editor of Palacio de Long Beach, the only bilingual magazine in the city. Long Beach is known as one of the most, if not the most, diverse city in America. For the next hour, News Long Beach is going to explore exactly what that means, from demographics to social and economic issues to a peek into the city's future. First, we start with these statistics. In 2000, whites were 33% of the population. In 2012, that number dropped to 28%. Latinos, on the other hand, saw a 6% jump in population during that same period. 23% of Long Beach residents live in poverty, but in the African American community, that number is 30%. And lastly, graduation rates for African American students and Latino students in the Long Beach Unified School District are below the average. Now, these are not just numbers. These represent real people and their realities. To help us understand these and other numbers are our guests. First, Doctors William Crampton and Alex Norman, both co-directors of Rethinking Greater Long Beach, a community think tank, and Dr. Juan Benitez, Executive Director of the Cal State University Long Beach Center for Community Engagement. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Let's begin this discussion with the numbers that we just saw on screen. What's your reaction to them?
Well, I think two main points. One is that although Long Beach has always prided itself and ourselves in the diversity, we have to be very cognizant that there are differences. We can't just lump all ethnic and racial groups together. So even though a majority of Long Beach is non-white, there are many differences both between groups, but also amongst each group. So for instance, the Cambodian population here in Long Beach has its own unique cultural and ethnic and racial history compared with that of African Americans, Latinos, and other groups. So although there's a lot of richness in our diversity, and there are many examples of ways that we celebrate that, we also have to be very cognizant of the policy implications of having these groups and the trends that we see amongst these groups.
Wonderful.
You
Doctor?
also have to look at it in terms of geographic of the city. There's a very wide diversity as you go from one area of the city to the other, such as in the North Long Beach area and the West Long Beach area, less than 10% of the population is white, while in the shoreline area and on the east side, almost 70% of the population is white. So some areas you have very high minority populations, other areas very high white populations.
Thank you.
The important thing, though, is that what are the policy and decision makers going to do with these data? I mean, these are not new data. Since, 13 years ago, when we began rethinking Greater Long Beach as an idea, the poverty rate was 19%. So that rate hasn't really changed. So what that means is that these numbers have just been floating around, and decision makers have not really responded with policies that made an impact on these numbers. So if you project that into the future, then it means that those people who are poor are more than likely to be poor, unemployed, uneducated, and if they do get a job, they'll be the first laid off and the last to be called back.
Thank you. Juan, what do you think some of the implications of this significant number of Long Beach youth growing up in poverty?
Well, I think Alex already alluded to it. I think the policy implications here is that we can't come up with one size fits all either policies and or programs and services by that same logic. I think what we want to avoid is a one size fits all solution to implications that may not be the exact same for all groups that policies are impacting. So for instance, if we're going to serve a particular group in Long Beach, we have to look, as Bill suggested, at the geographic area that's going to be served. If we're going to look at particular schools in the school district, again, we have to look at geography, we have to look at the composition of the specific school. And I think more importantly, that we be strategic and targeted programs and services versus kind of a universal approach to policy that doesn't take into account the differences and unique circumstances for each group. And I'm concerned that historically we haven't approached policies with that in mind. So I'd rather see us go from serving the community by demographic coincidence to more focused and strategic approaches.
Right. So we saw the graduation rates for Latinos and African Americans. How do you see education playing a role as a solution to that poverty rate here in Long Beach?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
the only solution. If you look at the statistics for Long Beach, if somebody doesn't have a high school degree, there's a 40% probability they're going to be living in poverty. If they have a college degree, there's a 5% probability they're going to live in poverty. Can look at the same thing with unemployment and the other ones. Education's a solution. Yes, the graduation rate is lower. Also, if we add into it the graduation rate for those who have completed the requirements to go to the California State University system or UC system, it becomes much lower, where it's less than 20% of the African Americans and African American students even have the right to apply to these schools. So education to me is and research all over the country is showing education is the primary route for long-term getting out of the poverty cycle.
And of course what that means then is the policies that are developed have to be targeted to recruit, retain, and graduate students who meet, first of all, the UC and Cal State University requirements. Right. And if they don't meet those requirements, they have an alternative or a career or a trade. And this is happening at the same time that with Long Beach Community College is eliminating certain trade and career courses. And yet the demand is high. So it doesn't really, the policy doesn't really meet the problem. And I think what has to happen is that policymakers and decision makers are going to have to really look at the problem and then develop the policies. And in Long Beach right now, the policies seem to be skewed to downtown development.
Do you agree with that?
And that's magnified, I completely agree, that's magnified by the fact that when we look at the conditions that perpetuate the data that's been shared, it's decision makers at many levels end up pointing the problem at the communities themselves rather than at institutional, systematic, and policy that perpetuate this.
So when you talk about decision makers, how does leadership development, both political and community leaders, how does that play a role in the solution?
I think it's directly connected. We have a vacuum in emerging leadership that can actually function as decision makers and policy makers. And that's directly connected to education. When a majority of your population is not achieving the same A through G completion rates, by default, you're not going to have access to the same educational systems and institutions as those that are achieving at higher rates. So not only is that around achievement, it's around opportunity as well. So it's really easy to say, Latinos don't prioritize education, African Americans don't prioritize education, without taking into account what are the structural, systematic factors that create these conditions in the first place.
Right.
It's not a condition that some students are performing at much higher levels than other students, and those other students tend to be African American and Latinos in Long Beach.
And I don't know whether it's by design, but certainly it's the byproduct of focus on developing downtown means that the neighborhoods suffer. So what you have is a downtown-centered policy, and the development of the downtown doesn't include benefits for the community. So for example, if there is to be relocation of individuals from downtown, there is no consideration for even awarding a stipend so that those who don't have right of refusal for the housing downtown can relocate somewhere else. it's like a no deposit, no return
Right.
attitude.
Right.
And I think what that means is that in the long run, as Juan says, we have to develop the kind of leadership that has the community's heart at its welfare, and those are the people that we need to elect and put into office.
So as the demographic, thank you, as the demographic landscape continues to change, how do you see that affecting the future of Long Beach?
If we don't make major changes in the community, the leadership, education, those systems, what we're going to see is a continuation. If you look at the trends since 2000, right now at the school level, we're going to have 41% of the population is Latino. At the school level, 54%, and as I understand this year, it's now 55% of the student body is Latino. It's going to be primary Latino, primary poverty, and we're going to continue the cycle on into the future.
I think what I would be looking at if I were a policy decision maker is what's the tipping point at which those who are not productive and contributing to the public coffers, at what point do they begin to have such a drain on the city funds that the city can't cope, and we end up like Detroit? Now that's a possibility, because if we don't educate our young people, if they're not able to get good jobs, they're going to be unemployed. They're going to be dependent upon an ever dwindling public fund,
Right.
which means that either we go bankrupt or we develop these young people as resources. So in a sense, it really means whether or not the people in decision-making positions are willing to put the same resources in for these new immigrants that they did for the people who came from Iowa.
I think another thing that impacts what Alex just mentioned is, well, who and what is informing and shaping decision making, and the decision makers. If there's a disconnect between decision makers and the communities that they're serving, then again, we're operating in a vacuum here in terms of what's shaping and informing decision makers. By the same token, we talk about community engagement, about parent engagement in schools, but if there's not a vested, systematic way to engage and involve community members, not just to do outreach to them, but for them to feel vested in decision making, in policy making, then again, we tend to perpetuate our errors in the past that way.
Right. And it's no secret that a lot of people that can vote don't vote. How do you feel about that, and how can we encourage people to go to the polls and take their role more seriously and take advantage of their voice?
Well, voting is absolutely necessary and important, but voting in and of itself is not enough, is not sufficient. And for those that either can't vote, you know, we have a young population. There are many other ways to influence and shape policy making. You don't need to necessarily be able to vote to go to a school site council meeting or a city council meeting. There are many other ways to be involved. Again, voting is absolutely necessary and essential,
Sure.
but for a large percent of our population, either by age or by eligibility, they aren't unable to vote, but there are many other ways to become involved. And that's what I meant by systematically creating avenues for folks to feel that they are vested, and that's through community engagement.
You know, ICO, the Interfaith Community Organization, has done an analysis of voting patterns in Long Beach by zip code, and has looked at the different ethnicities in terms of who votes. And basically, when you look at our districts, the 3rd district and the 5th district elect the mayor. And that's because the 3rd district and the 5th district are likely to have 50, 60% of the registered voters who vote. But when you look at the preponderance of voters and people who are registered to vote, the larger numbers are in the other districts. But because those districts will vote 16, 19, 25%, what happens is that the 2 districts, the 3rd and the 5th, end up selecting the mayor. So one of the strategies could be to show people why their vote can count, and then encourage them to vote. many people feel that their vote simply doesn't count. And there's adequate reason for them to feel that way, given the way some of our city elected leaders have made decisions.
Dr. Crampton?
I basically agree with both they say. I think voter turnout requires good voter education to let the people really know their vote counts. Too many don't. In our system, having it on a work day, although quote-unquote companies are supposed to give people time off to vote, it makes it much more difficult as opposed to some other countries that have it on weekends. And likewise, we could always go, which I like the Australian system, it's illegal not to vote. Don't show up the polls,
That'd
you get
be
a
nice.
ticket.
Yeah.
But the thing is, we need to make it easier, but we also have to let people know that their vote does mean something and it counts.
So with all the growing numbers of minorities in Long Beach, would it be safe to say that Long Beach has become a majority minority city? Is that safe to say?
Well, the numbers
West
indicate
of Redondo.
West of Redondo?
As I said, if you look at it, on the
Yeah.
east side, the majority is white.
Okay.
On the west side, north and that, the majority is minority. And I'm just using Redondo as the
Sure.
cutoff point, but
So Long Beach is several cities. You know, it's two cities. It's one, East Long Beach, and there's none East Long Beach. But one also has to consider that Virginia Country Club in that area, when you factor it socioeconomic wise, it acts just like East Long Beach. So we can't really get caught up in the numbers game, because just because there's a percentage share, a larger percentage share of Latinos who are in the population, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a Latinization of Long Beach, because the decision-making power still rests with the same people, irrespective of what those demographics do. So, as Juan says, what we have to do is make some way for civic engagement to be much more broadly spread so that people are able to contribute to the city without going through the established elected machine. Maybe we should have community engagement much more than civic engagement, because so many more resources and problems lie in our communities and not in our elected leadership.
and on the education side, the research on cities that have really have made some net drives turning education around. The focus has been on the local, very community level, not the large level. You know, the most important variable in students' education obtainment is the parents. The second is the community they live in. The third is their peer group. And the fourth is a school. And so we need focusing just on the school district is not going to solve the problem.
And at the end of the day,
Just for a closing
Sure.
remark, one more, please.
the numbers don't tell the whole story. The numbers are important, but they don't tell the whole story. Anyone that's driven around Long Beach knows. You drive to the west side, you're going to see a different Long Beach. You drive to North Long Beach, you're going to see a different Long Beach. What's important, I think, to focus on is there is no policy agenda that reflects community's best interest, whether that be the Cambodian population, Latino population, African American population. So we need to focus on developing policy agendas that reflect what's in the best interest of the community.
Okay, well, News Long Beach really wants to thank you for taking the time to speak with us. I'm sure we'll be hearing much more about these subjects in future shows. We now want to take a moment to hear from one of our future leaders, Felicia Cade from the Homeland Cultural Center.
Agape. My goal is not to mold, shape, or change you, but to love you for exactly who and where you are, shed tears with you for every scar life has left on you, lend a hand or two. If ever life seems too difficult, encourage you to see the truth that rests inside of you. We are family, yes, me and you. Makes no difference if our colors are different, cause love is an external, internal, universal language. My God is one of love, peace, compassion, and understanding. I want that love to pass through me so much that it becomes overwhelming, so confident that this flesh would dare to raise against it, that love would filter through every word from my mouth like melodies from an ancient instrument. Disarm any attack of selfish intent, love so strong that it becomes permanent linked. No matter how much tape you use, it won't remove it. My goal is not to mold, shape, or change you, just to love you, because love is the only thing that can break the chains of the unchangeable. Flick light switches in dark rooms, make birds chirp to a different tune, raise the death rate on hate, put food on empty plates. Love is not a cliche or something we just say, but the life we choose to live every day.
42% of Long Beach residents are Latino. That is a big number with big implications. Here to explore what it means for Latinos in Long Beach are three guests. Jessica Quintana is Executive Director of Centro Cha. Evangelina Ramirez, co-founder of Long Beach Latinos in Action. And Raymond Chavarria, Executive Director of the Latin American Community Center. Let's begin our discussion with the number 42%. I'm not sure that many people appreciate the significance of that number. What does it mean to each of you?
Well, that's a significant number. And living here in the city of Long Beach, that means a lot. And I think that we are very proud to have 42%, but I think the challenges are in our demographics and our leadership. It's really not representative of some of the work and that we're doing in the community. So what that means for me is success and hope, but I think we have some challenges.
And I'd like to add to that,
Sure.
yes, 42% is a large number, but in order for them to continue college, the parents don't understand what's going on, they don't understand the language, the child has to translate, which is sometimes, having language accessibility for the parents is very challenging. Also, just education, and we need to make sure that more parents are learning English.
Evangelina?
For me, it's something that impacts me when I know these amounts. But I have been seeing this for a little while. I'm a parent and I have 3 kids, and I see how all these things can affect our kids. And we have a lot of issues and a lot of challenges, and especially regarding education, and a lot of the parents that ignore how the school system is.
Right.
And I just want to conclude that even though we have 42%, we should be proud of our culture, because it's part of culture, speaking the Spanish, the language. And when you see other non-Hispanic learning Spanish, we should be proud.
It's very exciting. It's exciting.
Yeah.
That number's exciting.
Well, not to be less excited, but there is something I do want to talk about, and it's poverty. Latinos have the highest rate of poverty in our city. And I wanted to get your reactions as to why you think that is. Why are Latinos the poorest in our city?
Well, I think one of it is immigration status, not being able to get a good job, and having the green card. And it's, with immigration reform almost out the door, it's going to make it difficult. And sometimes you're talking about 1 and 2 parents not having any immigration status, so they have to get the lowest jobs, and it's very difficult.
Well, like when I started working on the group Long Beach Latinos in Action, I was thinking on that. Why we are most of the poor population. And one of the things that I see, first thing I see the language. It's a really big issue, because a lot of the parents, they have to work full time. They don't have time to go to the school. They have kids. They don't have time to educate themselves. This is one of the big issues, and because I passed for all these kind of things, I can tell you, because I started learning to speak English. I try every day to learn better, but it's really hard. It's really hard when you have a family, when you have especially in housing. For me, it's a big issue because you have a crowded place, you have a lot of kids, and there's a lot of people inside a one-bedroom apartment, and you don't have a space, you don't have time to do things for yourself. And I think and I believe that affects a lot of our people in my community.
Jessica?
In my observation in working with youth and families in poverty, you know, it's so comprehensive as to why there's the issues of poverty. But you know, we have new immigrants, and then we also have a long history of folks that have been here, the Chicanos, for a long time, and we have to ask ourselves, why do we still have poverty in the Latino community? And so my observation is that there's a real lack in human investment in our Latino community. We don't see a whole lot of investment in our communities, in our youth, in our families, in the adults. Unfortunately, you know, some of our education system, you know, has really pushed some of our students out. We have
Well, you talk about education. I definitely want to go there. I want to go back to what Evangelina said about housing. What is the problem with housing, and how does it affect the poverty levels in Long Beach? Can you speak about that a little bit, Jessica?
Well, you know, we don't have rent control. I mean, the city of Long Beach is one place that doesn't have rent control. A lot of families are paying more for rent than they are for anything else in their household. It's unfortunate. You know, we have high housing costs where we have families trying to work 2 and 3 jobs just to pay their rent.
Right. Or several families at times.
Several families living together
together.
to try to, you know, have a housing. You know, it's really important that we have rent control, that we have affordable quality housing for our residents who live here in the city, especially who have families. It's you know, it's important. Housing is kind of, you know, one of the key to the issues as to how well families are doing in their households.
I agree.
Yeah.
Evangelina?
And housing affects everything.
Right.
We think at housing, but housing affects everything.
Right.
Housing affects health, because if you live in a crowded place, if somebody gets sick, everybody gets sick.
That's right.
One of the things. The other part is kids doesn't have a place, don't have a place where study, a quiet place, a good place to study. They have more little brothers, little sisters, and they want to do other things, they want to play, and they don't have enough space. And another thing is because we don't have enough space inside of our houses and our apartments, most of the kids, they want to go out. And
Right.
what happened out? You know, we have a lot of gangs members, we have a lot of no safety things on the streets, and it's one of the things that really affect our families. And most of our families, they have to pay more of their half of their paycheck for housing, and sometimes they have to choose pay rent or buy food and necessary things for their family. You know,
Right.
that's a crazy
It's a
thing.
serious problem.
Well, the other thing goes back to economic, you know, poverty, unable to pay the high rents. So I remember what this house had, maybe 12 people, and all they had was a nightstand and a bed and then a wall. And it was like pigeon coops, you know, with like 12 people. And this is how some people are living. And as Angelina is saying, I met people that don't pay their gas and or the electricity or even their water because they can't afford to pay the bills. And I had a family with 4 kids, and you know, and they were living like that and stealing the water from other areas. So, and these stories exist. And
Right.
with the census in the year 2000, we saw that the multi-dwelling, how many people live in the home, and then of course, you know, it was difficult for us to get the number because the head house who owns the house was the only one who would fill out and not let everybody else. So, it is a big issue here in Long Beach.
Okay, well, thank you. Let's go back to Jessica's, she brought up education, and our first panel actually talked a lot about education. We know that education is a solution to get out of poverty. We know that Latinos are still graduating at a low rate in this city. Let's talk about why, and let's talk about maybe some ways that we could bring up those graduation rates. What are some solutions?
Well, some of the solutions are really supporting that young person who's attending school, because we talked about the challenges of economics. Lots of times those youth are out there having to go to work to help their parents because of the high cost of living. And the other challenge is, you know, not only do they don't finish school, but there's not a pathway to go to college or for a career. And so, you know, there needs to be more positive behavior intervention support systems at the schools and in the homes, and being able to help that young person to succeed and attend their high school and attend college. And you know, right now it's a lot of our kids are not. There's this sign of hopelessness in our community, and so a lot of kids don't even think they're going to even live today to even go to school tomorrow. And so it's, you know, they don't have that dream of, you know, going to college or, you know, finishing school, because they're just living for today. So it's important that we really have and bolster up those support systems in our school to ensure that we have the teachers who are culturally and linguistically appropriate to deal with those students, that we have parent support groups in our schools, that we have, you know, after school programming to support our kids in those communities. And so those are some of the things that are lacking.
Well,
Evangelina?
I was thinking one time, I say, how many hours a kid spends at the school and how many hours a kid spend at home without the time that they sleep?
On the computer,
You know,
on the computer.
not really. You know, most of the kids, they have a lot of homework to do. And I say that because I have 3. And it's really hard to them, you know. I have been seeing this for a little while, and one time I asked my son, what you need to continue going to the school, to continue growing up and be fine and get a career. And he told me, you know, I need the teachers help me a little more, because a lot of our teachers, they go to the school, they stand up in front of us, and we sometimes we don't understand, but they don't take the time to make it feel as welcome to the class. They don't make it feel as like we count, you know. And the other part, I think, like parents, we have to be involved in our child's life. You know, I can say that because I'm a parent, you know. And another thing, when I was asking them what you need, and they said, when we got 18, they try to just pushing us like adults. They don't help us to do the transition. You know, this is one of the things that they say, why they don't have a place inside of the school where we can feel free to go if we have problems, if we need something, people, counselors that can help us if we need that help.
Right. Raymond, what do you think?
I just want to make one comment that we're losing a lot of young kids to gangs. They're being recruited at a very young age. I just had a cousin, 18-year-old killed 2 weeks ago, and the second one is right below him, and the gang. So young kids, 17, 18, being recruited, and they're playing high roles in these gangs. So we're losing a lot of those kids into this. Right?
Yeah, that's right. And even if they graduate, we need to ask, are they going to be offered jobs with livable wages? Livable wages is a big thing now, where people are understanding how much do we actually need to be able to sustain our family. And many families are working more than one job. You know, 2 adults are working more than one job to keep it together. So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, if they graduate, it's how affordable college is going to be for them. And so, you know, with the high cost of going to college now, again, that's really not, you know, something that they can really take on that economic impact to be able to do that, nor can some of the families. And so how are we making our college more affordable for our students? You know, I think a lot of the challenges are just some of our systems. Our systems are not working, you know, to be able to help our kids and our youth to be succeed and make it and achieve their dream.
So even with all of the challenges that we've talked about, I want to ask you all to tell me what makes you most proud about the direction that we're going, Latinos in Long Beach. What makes you most proud about what's happening with Latinos in Long Beach?
Well, I think one of the things that I'm very proud is building a healthy community where it's educating many residents to be organizer leaders And you saw those when they're doing those campaigns and speaking up in city council. They're not afraid to speak up. So that's one movement that we're seeing, a lot of Latinos now taking that force. I have an evidence at MacArthur Park, 47 parents came and they fought for that park to be clean, safe, and now it's a clean park and all that.
Yeah, one of the things that I feel really proud of is we were working in the campaign the many voices, many languages, one voice. And that's a wonderful thing because people can go to the city hall and they can get interpretation and translation. And another thing that we are working right now with parents who really wants to get the GED and helping parents to understand better the scholar system. It's one of the things that I feel proud because we are working on that, and a lot of parents, they feel that they are not understanding better.
And I think what we're most proud of is really doing that work. Right now within our organization at Centro Cha, we're helping those young folks to get their high school diploma, to go on to college, to get the support that they need, get the job training that they need. And we've been very successful in also running our violence prevention Summer Nights Be Safe program in our communities and having great success and reducing crime in our community by 46%. So we're very, very proud of that.
All are wonderful reasons to believe that the future for Long Beach looks very bright. Thank you all for participating in Reimagining Diversity Long Beach. And now let's hear from another of our future leaders, June Cowsith.
Communities that I'm a part of. That I want to change the world community, that almost vegetarian holding up a peace sign community, that you're not doing enough to make change community, that you're doing too much, slow it down community, that Asian American, let's get our people together community, that hip hop, neo soul vibe and love and all that's brown skin and beautiful conscious Africana community, that Asian American community, that hip hop, that Thai Buddha blessing ancient temples, ancestral prayers, alms to the monk community, that forgiveness for the Christians that said you're going to hell community, that I don't know enough about Laos, what is the secret war community, that healing community, that dreamer commuting on the 405, 510, 101, 110 traffic community, that tired of being the ethnic girl but don't want to play white community, that Long Beach culturally diverse community, that cycling, I don't wear expensive spandex, let's ride or die community, that I ain't no hipster just because I ride a bike community, that spit your heart out through words that don't always have to rhyme community, that sing to express, not to impress, ain't got no record deal community, that independent community, village of strong women who grew up tomboy and now embrace the LGBTQ community, yup, that queer community, scarred by men and dare to be stronger community, writing plays and prose about our woes community, even one woman show community, grassroots organizing, let's empower the youth community, won't admit too broke to eat out sometimes community, that Craigslist job hunting community, struggling community, that happiness to have health and happiness if not material wealth community, that flat-chested don't need no implants community, that love your natural state community, that be yourself community, that too afraid of being a part of more than one community, scared of being hurt by community, that it's okay, you're still learning community, that don't mistake company for community, that it's okay, times are tough, but we gotta hold it together through community.
The future begins with the present, and this evening we have 4 youth leaders who are building the future of Long Beach. First, Citlali Hernandez is a senior at Wilson High School in Long Beach and a youth leader for Californians for Justice. Next, we have Dwayne Smith with Men Making a Change. With Kamai Girls in Action, we have Amanda M. And we have Christopher Scott Covington. He's a community organizer for Kamai Girls in Action. Good evening to all of you. Let's begin with this fact. 25% of Long Beach residents are under the age of 18. This is a young Long Beach. You must see that in your everyday lives. Talk about the significance of a young Long Beach. And I'd like to go around the panel and ask each of you to list one of the different challenges facing young people today. So you want to start maybe with Citlali?
I think the significance that Long Beach has such a strong youth group overall is that, well, it would be because a lot of the things that happen in our communities impact youth the most. So even statewide, a lot of things, most of the decisions made and policies or around certain things, especially involving education, affect youth the most. And so I think one of the issues that youth face the most in Long Beach is not being able to voice themselves and having an opinion on what decisions are going through that affect them the most. So not having a say in how money can be distributed in their schools or what resources they need the most in schools. I think that would be the biggest issue that youth faced.
Dewan?
Yeah, I feel like, there are challenges with voicing your opinions. With this being a young Long Beach, you see a lot of young people protesting rallies. A lot of young people are kind of, have to, I don't want to say radical, but you have to be, more outstanding to get your voice out there. And we do deal with a lot of things in Long Beach. You have peer pressures, so it's a lot of people that are affected by influences, negative influences, because it is a young Long Beach. So you have the young kind of leading the young,
Right.
and that can be a good thing and a bad thing. I think that's why we're here, because we're trying to be that good leader. Those good leaders in the community that the youth can look up to.
Thank you. Amanda?
I think that one of the most challenging things for youth in general, from all the work that I've done, is just being able to finish school and do it while you're still being well. Because a lot of the times, especially from the Cambodian community, I noticed that a lot of people think of us under the model minority myth, and they automatically assume that Cambodians are better off or well off than most Southeast Asians.
Did you say model minority?
Yes.
Model minority.
Yeah.
So you're looked at as minorities who are all the other minorities should look at and be like.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, and so with that, they automatically assume that we all go to college, we all get good jobs, and have these amazing lives. But from all the work that I've done with Khmer Girls in Action, that wasn't the case. A lot of our students who are at Poly or at a lot of the a lot of the colored students at the schools, they had really low graduation rates. And that's because a lot of the times when our students have to deal with family issues, financial issues, all that stuff, it all affects their wellness and how well they do in school. Because if you're not feeling well, your mind is elsewhere when it comes up to school. And so I think that's one of the most important things that affect youth.
And you are, Chris, you're multi-ethnic, and so you must see this from several different perspectives. You have several different ethnicities that you identify with. What are some of the challenges you as a multi-ethnic person kind of sees here in Long Beach?
Being multi-ethnic, I'm African American, Irish, Scottish, Hispanic, and Chinese.
Oh my goodness.
So through my youth, it was always not feeling like I belonged. When I hung out with my African American neighbors, they're like, "Oh, you should go hang out with the Hispanics and Mexican kids," And I'm like, "No, I'm a part of you. I'm with you," and it just never clicked. And it happened and followed me throughout, even now, being accepted in different workforces and so on and so forth. But I'm so glad to work with a social justice organization who accepts me for who I am. Specifically with youth who identify as being multiracial, I do believe the core issue that they're facing is having support networks within their schools, especially within high school, because once you enter 9th grade, you're automatically entering a society where it's completely segregated. You have the football players, you have the soccer players, and then you have the Hispanic groups, the African American groups, and it even comes so far to at specific schools, they name those groups different towns. So being multi-ethnic, you're like, where can I go? Where do I belong? And I feel that there needs to be support networks, not only for multi-ethnic youth, but for youth across our community. There's after-school programs, then parks close normally at sundown, but where do you go from there?
Right.
What programs are available?
I thought it was interesting how you said that you're multi-ethnic and you struggled with being accepted But in fact, isn't that where the future's going? Aren't we all eventually going to kind of be a shade of brown, café con leche, as Latinos call it? So this is why it's so important that you're here. We want to kind of show that this is the future and talk about some solutions, particularly within education. How can we make education more accessible, more something that some way to make it so that Latinos feel and African Americans and Cambodians feel like it's not just for one group, it's for all of us?
Like I said earlier, I think youth really need to be a part of the decision-making process.
So leadership development, because that
Basically.
sounds like emerging leaders. If you're a leader, you're going to be part of the decision. You're going to.
Because a lot of students, they complain about how things don't go their way. If you really wanted something to go your way, I think you should really put the effort and fight for it. So I think that because Long Beach has such a strong youth group, I think that there's a lot of voices that still need to be heard. There's a lot of voices that should be heard, and they're strong voices. They're young voices. So I think that because of that, that students really should just try to be more involved in what's going on at school, because society has grown into this behavior of not wanting to be a part of things. A lot of teenagers in school, they don't want to be a part of the things that some students do. They don't want to be part of school at all. They don't feel like they belong. They don't feel like they should be there. They feel like they'd rather be at home doing whatever they want to do rather than really trying to worry about what's going to happen to me.
Right. And hasn't it been true historically that when you get involved and you realize the power of these numbers, these statistics in Long Beach, how these numbers of these groups are growing, when they unite, change is more likely to happen, and we can address some of these challenges. Dewan, did you want to talk about some other possible ways to address challenges?
Well, I agree with the leadership development part of it. I feel like if you have a certain issue or something that's bothering you at school, or you think that you're not being represented well, I think that you should stand up and do something about that. Maybe talk to your principal and say, hey, I want to start a African American history club, or a Khmer history club or something like that, if you feel like you're not being represented. So I think education and leadership goes hand to hand.
Right.
So I agree with what you totally. I agree with what she just said. So me personally, I don't know. I haven't actually, I didn't go through the Long Beach Unified School District, so I don't know what they're teaching, if they're even teaching Black history as far as the African American male, but it's a lot of things that's kind of being left out. Like a lot of people don't know that African Americans, we have our own national anthem. People don't know that. It's probably people at home like, what? Like, what? Yeah, but we have our own national anthem. That's something I was taught in school.
Right.
But yeah, I think you just need to, advocate for what you want to learn in school.
Thank you. Amanda?
I think to better represent the Cambodian community, I feel like a lot of the decision making and problem solving and a lot of the planning for certain events or certain things that are happening in our community aren't led by certain groups, and I feel that there should be specific cohorts, basically an Asian Pacific Islander cohort, so that they have their voice represented, because I feel like in those spaces a lot of the times it's Hispanic folks that's being represented, African American folks are being represented, but a lot of the times we forget that there is a very large Cambodian population here in Long Beach especially.
How large is it outside of Cambodia?
We are the largest we have the largest population of Cambodians outside of Cambodia in the United States.
Wow.
There's over 19,000 Cambodians here. And so for us to be have our own cohort, our own representative when it comes up to decision making, I feel like that would really help address some of the issues, or how how the Cambodian community goes through certain issues.
Chris?
In addressing educational issues, youth development is key. But I feel we could take it a step forward in terms of having authentic partnership with our youth. with the youth who are actually taking the brunt of these issues. Oftentimes, education systems bring in professionals, people with doctorate degrees, and who are supposable experts on the issues of youth, but our youth are our experts. And I feel that our youth have to have authentic, true partnership with our school district in order to provide the necessary policies that will support our youth onto a pathway to success. Within the city of Long Beach, in the school district, students are actually suspended every 19 minutes during school hours based off of suspension and expulsion rates that are currently being targeted on our youth. And the majority of those youth who are taking the brunt of this are youth of color, the youth who are actually sitting here today. And there needs to be programs that address suspension issues, but create an alternative and arm our teachers with the skills and the necessary resources in order to provide conflict resolution within the classroom.
Interventions.
But key thing is creating community within the classroom.
Right.
If our youth can understand where our teachers are and our teachers can understand where our youth are, we build community and we become a unit rather than, oh, you're just another student in my classroom and I need you to leave because the bell's about to ring.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. I wanted to ask you guys about future employment, jobs. Where do you guys see yourselves in about 10 years, let's say? What are your goals? Where do you plan to be in about 10 years?
Well, I still feel that in 10 years I'm still going to be kind of young, but I want to be able to study in political science or public administration and really try to figure out a better way to support the work that I do now. I think when I was introduced to this my freshman year of high school, that it really was able to help me identify myself and who I am and what I belong to. I think it really helped me figure out what I want to do with my life. I think the main thing I really want to do is being able to support youth in trying to make their lives easier and better and in a way privileged, because a lot of the times youth now, we're not privileged, especially youth of color. We go through so much trying to be at an equal level to those who are not like us. So I think 10 years from now, I want to help manage campaigns and write speeches, and I'm more interested in freelance writing also. But
do you think that'll be in Long Beach, or do you think that?
I think it's going to start off in Long Beach like it is now, but I think I'm looking at a bigger picture.
A bigger picture. Okay. Dewan, how about you? Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
In 10 years, I want to finish my community work, doing a lot of community organizing, and
will you be in Long Beach
doing
that community work?
I would
and
like
if
to
not,
have
why not?
Yeah, I would like to have some ties to Long Beach. I probably won't be living in Long Beach at that time because I like traveling. Like that's what brought me to here to good old Long Beach because I traveled. But I want to continue community work. Maybe have another nonprofit outside of Long Beach, maybe Compton. I do a lot of music, so I like having positive music, uplifting music to change the community. That's what youth are migrating to. Right. It's like what's hot, what's new, and I want that new and hotness to be positive change. Conflict resolution. You don't have to always fight to be popular.
Right.
It's a lot of things going on. I can go on and on and on, but
sure,
I want to.
We just I'm curious because I see a lot of talent up here, and I hope that you'll stay in Long Beach and remember, where you are now and some of the solutions. Can I ask you where you think you'll be?
In 10 years.
In terms of job or?
Yeah, in 10 years, I hope that I'll be finished with school by then. And I really do want to stay in Long Beach for like basically my whole life, because I feel like I started this work. I started doing a lot of work to change my community since I was in 9th grade, and I really want to see like the results through to the end, because I feel like you never know like what changes you can make unless you can see it through to the end.
Thank you, Chris.
In 10 years, I would have been completed with a bachelor's degree, so crossing my fingers. But what I see myself doing is, at the moment, I'm a community organizer. I work with youth, I work with parents to really provide policy change within our city and arming our parents and our students with the skills in order to make that change. And what I see myself in 10 years is providing the same service, but for all of Central Long Beach. I was born and raised there. I'm gonna live there. I love Long Beach because of the diversity that's in place.
It's what makes us such a rich place and such a wonderful, that our strength is in our diversity, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I see myself doing that on a larger level. I would either like to work with the city manager who provides a lot of those resources into our districts, or this is a far-fetched one, but within the state of California, we're seeing a trend of young elected officials, and I would like to build my skills in order to provide effective services in order to lead as a leader within my community so that the resources are being put where it's most needed within the city of Long Beach.
Wonderful. Well, I'd like to thank you and all our guests for joining us on this special edition of News Long Beach, Reimagining Diversity in Long Beach on the Public Access Digital Network, PADNet. You can continue the discussion online on Facebook at News Long Beach and Voice Waves. I'm Andrea Solsona, Palacio de Long Beach Magazine. Make sure to pick up the latest copy dedicated to the diversity of Long Beach. Good night.